welcome to another episode of the MTG Dudes. I am Ned. With me, as always, is my co host Joseph.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about red non creature spells that we like. This is generally for the Commander format, but they're also quite handy in the Modern and Pioneer formats as well. So, looks like we're going to start by talking about Thrill of Possibility. Take it away, Joseph.
Okay, Thrill Possibility. The reason why it's an honorable mention is because one of the things that red is not as good with, because usually there's a sacrifice to it, but this is probably one of the better cards that you can do with red, especially if you have extra lands in your hand. But Thrill of Possibility is an instant. It is a colorless and a red. And what it does is you have to, on the cast, you have to discard a card, but then you get to draw two cards. So if you have an extra land and you don't want it, you get to draw two cards by sacrificing that land and playing this card.
It's definitely useful, and red is, generally speaking, pretty poor in terms of card drawing. So anytime you can get that card advantage, go for it.
And like I said, sacrificing a land for two cards that can be burned or does something specific is always a good trade-off.
So from here, we're going to talk about Vance's Blasting Cannons. This is an honorable mention for me because it's sometimes difficult to pull this trigger. 3 colorless and a red. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library, so it's deck acceleration. If it's a non-land card, you may cast that card this turn. When you cast your third spell in a turn, you may transform Vance's Blasting Cannons. Now, it turns into a legendary land, lets you tap for a red, or you can pay 2 colorless and a red, tap the land, and do 3 damage to target creature or player. It's a good call, but like I say, it can be difficult to get those 3 spells in one turn, and that's why it's only an honorable mention. But good card all the same.
Not much I can really add to that. If you're playing a burn deck, it is definitely a must-have, I think. And if you can play more than one, that's even better. So, the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be this one, and it kind of goes along with that one as soon as I can figure out where I put it. It wasn't that far away. Experimental Frenzy. This is one of my top 5s. Red has a way of getting to the point where you're topping decking really quick. And this card lets you do a couple different things at one time. It's 3 in a red. I sense a theme of 4 in the red category for a lot of the really good cards. But you may look at the top card of your library at any time. It's an enchantment, so it goes on your board and stays on your board unless you decide to remove it. You may play the top card of your library, and you cannot play cards from your hand. So you can use this as a way to rebuild your hand as you're top decking. And it makes a really nice play sometimes. Then when you get to the point where you're starting to discard or you just have really good cards in hand, you can pay 3 in a red, and then you destroy this card, so then you can go back to playing from your hand again.
Yeah, it's certainly useful, and again, if you're able to look at the top card of your deck, that is an advantage. And to go along with that, you might want to scry that card underneath and cast the next one potentially. There's a lot of uses for this guy.
I know, like I said, in burn decks, it's really useful because you can burn out your hand really fast. Which one you want to go to next, bud?
Let's talk about the Mizzium Mortars. Mizzium Mortars. This is a sorcery, 1 colorless and a red. Mizzium Mortars does 4 damage to target creature you don't control. Yeah, that's an okay effect. What I really like about this is the overload part of it. You may cast it for 3 colorless and 3 red, and instead of doing damage to one creature you don't control, it's going to do 4 damage to every creature you don't control. That is a fantastic play because it'll get rid of most small and even mid-sized creatures at that point without doing any harm to your own.
And 4 damage is a lot. That man, I cannot talk today. 4 damage is enough to kill off probably about 2/3. Excuse me, 2/3 of the creatures out there, including tokens. There's not a lot of tokens that are bigger than 3. There is obviously some, but 3 is the average number for tokens in my experience, or less. And a lot of your best impactful creatures, mana ramp creatures, goblins, gremlins, dwarves. Just, I mean, the list goes on. Even a lot of your dragons are for
Toughness.
toughness. Thank you. I want to say vitality. I know that wasn't it. Gee, I wonder where that's from. But you know, a lot of creatures have a toughness of 4 or less, and that's a big majority of different colors. Now, again, is there exceptions to that? Of course there is. But, you know, if you have a problematic card, Mitzi and Mortars played by itself is not a bad deal early game. But if you can do that overload and the board is really, really wide, you can even out the playing field really fast. So I'm in full agreement with what you're saying.
Moving on.
This one I did in a combination. It's another enchantment. Enchantment means they go on the battlefield and they stay in the battlefield, except for Vance's Blasting Cannons was a little exception, if you can get the trigger. But I did this with a card named Agent of Treachery, which I have talked about before. And there's a lot of other uses for this card, but Agent of Treachery is probably my biggest one I used it with. And I think I've talked about the combo itself before, but this is probably one of my favorite cards, especially if you want multiple creatures. But it's a card flip, and I really want to go back to this at some point in a commander deck, because I thought it was really fun. But Mirror March is 5 and a red. It's a really big target you really have to concentrate on if you're the defending player once you start seeing what it does. But once it's in play, whenever you throw a non-creature and it enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin, and until you lose a flip, for each flip you win, create a treasure or a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste and exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So you only keep them for the turn, but if you throw down a creature, you could have a really, really big army coming at it real quick. And if you can copy this in Commander, or if you have 2 or 3 or multiple copies down, you can make a really big army, swing in, and you really don't care if the creatures die. And if they take out something in a process, that's a bonus.
Yeah, it's definitely a good call. And you keep flipping the coin until you lose, so you might get 4 or 5 or sometimes 6 copies of a thing. And like you said, that's usually enough to kill something, because they're not going to let them all through, even if they're only 3/3s.
And again, like I said, I've done it with Agent of Treachery. I built a deck around this where I did red, green, blue. And the green was for mana acceleration. I had a bunch of draw lands out, play lands. And then, so I could get this and Agent of Treachery played really early. And that was pretty much my deck. And Agent of Treachery, whenever it enters the battlefield, and I didn't put it on here and I should have, so you guys can see it. But when Agent of Treachery comes in the battlefield, it steals a permanent. Any permanent. And by doing this trick, I was playing a 60-card deck on Arena. And I got 3 of these out. And I played Agent of Treachery. And when I played it, I flipped. I got 5 Agent of Treacheries, and I stole all of their lands with that. Then, of course, I lost a flip. Then I had 2 more copies of it. So the second one, I stole 1 or 2 of their creatures, and then the last one, before I lost, and the last one I only won 1, but he only had 2 creatures left, and at that point, you know, he had 1 creature left. So, when that last creature got hit, I swung in with everything. There was nothing he could do. He had no lands. He couldn't stop my creatures. And I took him down to almost no life. And then he pretty much scooped. But, I mean, I had the game the next turn because he had nothing he could do.
Yep, that's the advantage because you get to, even though you had to sacrifice the Agent of Treachery, you still got to keep the permanents.
So, yeah, it was a wicked play. But, yeah, Mirror March can make a disadvantage really quick. I probably had to take that call, but oh well. I totally lost my train of thought because I really need to do that. Anyway, where are we at?
Aftershock.
You want that one. Okay.
Aftershock. This is a sorcery. 2 colorless and 2 red. Destroy target artifact, creature, or land. Aftershock deals 3 damage to you. In a game of Commander, 3 damage is no big deal at all. You can make that up in one play. But what I like about this is the versatility. You can target an artifact, a creature, or a land. It's whatever's causing you the most problems. If you get it early, go ahead and use it to take out a land and mana short your opponent. If it's mid or late game and something's causing you a problem, knock out an artifact or a creature. I put this on my list for that reason. You get your choice of any of 3 targets.
That's really nice. I don't have anything to add to that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next one. That's actually a card I'm not very familiar with. So, but the next one I'm going to talk about is a Planeswalker, the first one on our list. And this is one from War of the Spark. And it is Chandra Fire Artisan. It is 2 and 2 red for Chandra Fire Artisan, 4 loyalty. So every time you trigger her, she gets an additional loyalty unless you're proliferating. And her text says whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from her, she deals that much damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. Her +1 get you exile the top card of your library and you may play it this turn. Her -7, which I have done on numerous occasions, is exile the top 7 cards of your library and you may play them this turn also. Now, the nice thing I like about her is, if nothing else, I like her +1 because it's essentially card advantage. Her -7 gives you a lot of card advantage and lets you go through your deck really fast. Now, it also does some major damage when you remove counters from her. So her -7 is going to do an automatic 7 damage to a target opponent or Planeswalker. Very effective, very nice, and very, very good.
Yeah, the other advantage to that is when your opponents attack Chandra, if you can handle losing a few loyalty from her, go ahead and do it because it's going to do direct damage to that opponent or something they control. It's not a bad play at all to let something through as long as it's not going to kill her. Or sometimes you might want to so you can get that extra damage on the opponent and help push them off the cliff a little bit faster.
I know one of the things that Red is not the greatest at is card advantage, and she is really, really good with that. That is one of the big things that, if you notice on my list, I have a lot of card advantage stuff, and that's done a couple too. The next one we're going to talk about, let's go ahead and hit Red Sun Zenith. That's here somewhere, isn't it? Yep, there it is. You had it.
This is my very favorite card in red. It's 1 red and X, and it's a sorcery. Red Sun Zenith deals X damage to target creature or player. If a creature dealt damage this way would be put into the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. That is really nice for removal because even if they have graveyard recursion, the creature is going to stay out of play for the rest of the game. And then after that's all resolved, shuffle Red Sun Zenith into its owner's library. So you could play it again. I've had games, commander games. There's only one of these allowed in the deck, but I've managed to cast it 3 times in one game because of that reshuffle ability. It's fantastic, and like I say, the exile is icing on the cake.
I know the one thing about Red Sun Zenith that is so great is, like you said, the reshuffle. But yeah, each time you play it, you can put more mana into it, so you can do an even bigger target the next time too. It's a really beautiful card. And like you said, just being able to exile. And if you're not playing a commander, you're playing 60 card deck, so you can play 4 of them. So your chances of drawing that is even higher. And the chances of using it effectively can eventually be 1 every turn, essentially.
Yeah, I actually have this in a modern deck, and 4 of them gets absolutely obnoxious.
Yep. So the next one I got, and it's debate which one I want to do next, but I'm going to go ahead and do Act of Treason. This is one of the first red cards that I used that I really grew in love with. Excuse me. But it's 2 in a red, and if you notice, when I talk about it, I have been working on trying to build a deck around stealing, and not very successfully yet, but I'm still working on it. But I'm getting more and more ideas of how to make it effective. But Act of Treason is 2 in a red, and you can't control a target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, and it gains haste to end of turn. One thing red can do really well is sacrificing creatures. You steal the creature, you use it, you sacrifice it. There's also, if you do red-blue, there's also ways to balance it so it stays on your side permanently with this card, which is what I've been trying to master. It's a brutal card when you have really good and really effective creatures. It can be absolutely brutal. Steal a commander, steal their most effective card that lets them maybe steal your stuff. I mean, there's just so much stuff you can do with this card.
Yeah, Act of Treason is a really good play, and like you said, if you can find a way to blink the creature back onto your side of the board before end of turn, it's going to stay there for the rest of the game, unless your opponent has a means of stealing it back or killing it. So it's a very strong play, and for 3 mana, definitely go for it if you get a chance.
So the next one we're going to hit on is going to be Lightning Bolt.
Lightning Bolt. 1 red. Instant. Lightning Bolt deals 3 damage to any target. Self-explanatory, really. You're paying 1 mana to do 3 damage to anything that you see. It's been around since the first printing of Magic the Gathering. I've always liked this card, and it goes into every red deck that I build, regardless of play style. It is that good.
Cheap, easy, effective, and 3 damage can knock out quite a list of creatures. Very nice card. The last one I'm going to talk about is one that we both had on the list. One of us had to pick it, so I got it, because I won the coin toss. But Chandra, Torch of Defiance. 2 in a red. Again, Chandra is just a really, really nice Planeswalker. I mean, there's a bunch of iterations of her that are Planeswalkers, but she is just a really nice Planeswalker, and she's a fan favorite. But this is probably the top Chandra of them all. 2 in a red, 4 loyalty, 4 abilities. It's very rare to see Planeswalkers with that many abilities on it. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 at max to have 4 or 5. There's a Jace, there's a Bolas. I know there's another 1 or 2. But anyway, and there's another one that just came out too. But anyway, her first ability is a +1. Exile the top card of your library, and you may cast that card. If you don't, Torch of Defiance deals 2 damage to each opponent. So not only are you getting card advantage, but if you don't play it, you also deal 2 damage to each opponent if you don't play that card. Very handy, does multiple things in one shot. The other +1 is you add 2 red. One thing that red does not do very well is mana acceleration. This card will help with that. The next thing is a -3. She deals 4 damage to target creature. There's again, we've talked about how a lot of creatures are three defense. This one goes after a 4 defense or less. So it does just a little bit more for a little bit more. And then the last one is a -7, the ultimate. It's hard to get a Planeswalker to hit the ultimate, but when you do, it's very nice. But her -7 is you get an emblem with, whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. That is almost, if you can get her emblem to hit, the emblems never go away. So once the emblem hits, it's a permanent. And so once that happens, whenever you cast a spell, it doesn't matter what spell it is. It can be an instant, sorcery, red, blue, green, purple, pink. Yeah, there's no colors, but you get the point. But any spell you play, it will automatically do 5 damage to any target you choose. And if you have a spell slinger deck, which means you throw out a bunch of spells on each turn, you can almost generally knock somebody out really quick at that point.
I have actually attained Chandra's emblem in one of my commander decks, and it is absolutely devastating. You can clear a board really quickly once you have Chandra's emblem. She is far and away my favorite of the red planeswalkers, and for all the reasons that you said, but that -7, it works when you cast a creature, it works when you cast artifacts, even other planeswalkers. You're going to do 5 damage to something. Fantastic play.
For only 4 mana, it is a ridiculously powerful card. She is I think when you look at the top 10 of all time's planeswalkers, she has to be on that list. She's that strong. So now we're going to go to the very last one. Another planeswalker is the winner as the ultimate, and that's because that's going last on this list. But here you go.
Jaya Ballard, 2 colorless and 3 red. The +1 gives you 3 red mana. You can only use that to cast an instant or sorcery, but still, red does a ton of instant and sorcery spells, so you can get use out of that. Her other +1, you discard up to 3 cards and draw that many cards. Also a good play because card advantage is something red is very weak at doing. But the emblem, this is another emblem that is definitely worth having. You may cast instant and sorcery spells from your graveyard. If a spell cast this way would be put into the graveyard, exile it instead. So, it's essentially graveyard recursion. If you're playing a lot of instant and sorcery spells, Jaya Ballard is a must, because you get the mana, you can do the card advantage, and then you can cast things from the grave once you have the emblem. Very good play.
And I've seen decks, and this is absolutely brutal, but I've seen decks where they've had Jaya Ballard and Chandra Torch of Defiance. That is 5 mana on 1 turn. That is essentially, once they're both down, that is free mana. So you have 6 lands down, you have a Red Sun Zenith, and they have a really big creature. Let's say Galta, for example. It's a 12 defense. All of a sudden, you throw out the Red Sun Zenith, and you throw 6 mana into it. There's 5 more mana. And then maybe you throw out that other...
Sacrifice some goblins for red
Sacrifice
mana.
a goblin. There you go. And that's 12 power right there. I miscalculated. Maybe you have 8 mana, whatever. But anyway, you get the point. But I mean, that can take out a really, really big creature. And there's not a lot of creatures that are that big. But the ones that are, I mean, these 2 cards can really do some massive damage together, especially. Yeah, when you're playing one, you almost have to have at least not a clue of 1 Jaya Ballard to go with that Chandra, because, I mean, that's just nasty.
Yep, and you can use Chandra's 2 red mana to help you cast Jaya Ballard.
There you go. Anyway, we had some discussions. We would love to hear about some cards in red that you guys absolutely love to play. The list goes on. There's the you can't even say it. Fling is a good card. Fling is one of those cards that I wanted to put in honorable mentions, but I've already got my top picks. But I mean, there's so many good cards in red. It's hard to pick one.
I agree. Red is my favorite color in Magic, and I just love the play style of burning everything to the ground. Red does that better than any other color, and these are just a few examples of things that I use to make that happen.
Burn it down! Please like and share and subscribe. And just burn that subscribe button. We would love that. Hope you guys enjoy it. And like, share, subscribe. Give us your comments, your feedback. And we will see you on the next one.